Wonderful. Hello, how's Owen? Hagley, if you are watching this later, hello to you as well. My name is Laura, if I don't know you, if I haven't met you yet. And I get the joy of being with you today as we crack open the second session in our series, What the World Needs Now. And I think I've got a pretty strong contender for this one this week. I wouldn't say this is what the world needs now. I would say this is what the world is absolutely desperate for now. And this is what people, individuals, are desperate for now too. And that is peace. We're talking about peace this week. And if we look around our world is in like an epidemic of conflict. Everywhere we see conflict, whether it be within ourselves, that we lack personal peace, whether it be relationally with each other, whether it be on a global scale. It feels like conflict and division are absolutely rife. There is an organization, which admittedly I had never heard of before this, called the Global Peace Index. I'm sure you're very familiar with them. And every year they kind of do a measure of peacefulness in the world. And in 2025, when this was done, they found that global peacefulness has declined every single year since 2014. And to the point that this survey was taken in 2025, there were 59 active state-based conflicts going on in our world. And at this point, 152,000 deaths were attributed to those conflicts. It's everywhere. And we do what we can to have peace. We do what we can to manufacture peace for ourselves. We meditate, we breathe, we use crystals, we channel energies, align our bodies, we journal, we detox. We do all these different things, burn herbs, and increase our own mindfulness in an attempt to manufacture this peace. However, I want to spend some time this morning talking about how I believe that actually only Jesus can bring the peace that is really missing from our lives and from this world. And through this series, this whole series is based on a passage in the Bible from a book called Galatians. And in Galatians it says this, but the fruit of the Spirit is love, joy, peace, forbearance, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, and self-control. Against such things there are no law. And as we go through this, we're going to look at each of these, many of them. But the idea is that as we get to know who Jesus is, as we spend time with him, wherever you're at with him now, today, as we get closer to him, as we let who he is influence our lives and influence our hearts, he grows these things in our lives to be a presence in the world making a difference. And so today I want to take a moment to look at a story from the life of Jesus that I think begins to indicate some of the bits that are missing and why peace is so missing from, it's not good English, is it? Is so missing from our world. Bear with me. The first one of these that I want to look at today is this one, that Jesus asks us, as one of these missing things is to pursue peace. Now, we're going to look at a story from the life of Jesus, as I said, but before we get there, I want to look at the context to this story. It's not a long story, but the context is really important. The story happens at night, but I want to talk about the day before. So you meet with Jesus in this passage of the Bible. It's in Matthew 8. And we find that Jesus is in a place called Capernaum. Now, he spent a lot of time in Capernaum. He kind of was around there a lot. It wasn't an unusual thing. But as he was there, this particular day, he starts the day by teaching. Now, for those of you who are familiar with the Bible or know the stories of Jesus, when I say teaching, what I mean is that he's kind of wrapping up the Sermon on the Mount. For those of you who are familiar with that, it takes up 3 chapters of Matthew, so it's a bit of a chunk. But there's debate as to whether it was all done at one time or it was broken up. But essentially, at the start of this day, he's wrapping up this mammoth piece of teaching. So this is how his day begins. And then, after that, he's kind of chilling, going along, and he finds someone who has leprosy, and he prays for them, and they get healed. Next up on his day, on his to-do list, as he's again walking to his next place, he meets with a Roman guard who's a centurion. And this guy blows Jesus away because he just seems to get it. He understands the fact that Jesus hasn't got to come back to his house to heal his servant, but Jesus has this authority over anything that causes chaos, over anything that is evil, over anything that doesn't belong in our world. And from where Jesus is, he heals this centurion's servant. Next up. Then, I think on this point, it was just a transition to get to Peter's house, his mate Peter. And he turns up there, and Peter's mother-in-law's sick, and so he cracks on with his day and heals her too. And then, after chilling out at Peter's for a bit, probably watch a bit of Netflix, he goes out, and there are loads and loads of people who are sick and have demons, negative spirits living within them, and he gets them healed. And then at the end of the day, he thinks, right, we need a bit of a debrief, gang, and so he gets the guys who follow him around and says, this is how it's been today. We now need to just take a moment. We're going to get in a boat and we're going to chill. And so at the end of this day, this really busy, crazy day, Jesus recognizes this moment that he needs to take to rest. Now, I'm not going to spend a long time on this section of this morning. But if we're talking about peace, then as we look at the life of Jesus and how Jesus wants us to be in this world, his rhythms of peace and rest are really important to start with. Because at the end of this busy day, Jesus recognizes that he needs to rest. And as you look at the life of Jesus, he has these rhythms of rest and peace and going away and being quiet and spirituality and prayer that are woven throughout the life of Jesus. Now, as I said, I'm not going to spend ages on this, but if we don't nail these moments of peace and rest in our lives, then what happens is that we don't have good soil for the rest of all that I'm going to talk about today to grow in. If we don't have our rhythms of peace and rest right. And what happens, I will speak for myself, I would never project this onto you, but my moments of peace and rest often look like me sat on TikTok. Or they look, not literally like on my phone, or going home and just watching Netflix. And sometimes my rhythms of peace look even more ridiculous than that. I'm going to tell you a story. I'm going to ask you not to judge me. But before I tell you this story, could you just indicate to me, and maybe in Hagley you could raise your hand or online, put a little thing in the chat, if you have ever been responsible for 50% or more of the childcare during the 6-week summer holidays. Could you just, okay, you guys, take yourself there mentally, and you will understand how I got to this place. I love my kids so much, and sometimes I need a break. And normally I begin to creak about week sort of 5, 4.5 to 5 of the 6-week holiday. And I have a wonderful friend in this room who knows this, and she knows my rhythms of peace. And so I found myself now in the 6 weeks holidays. We have a cupboard downstairs, and it's a cupboard you can fit in. And in this cupboard, you know where this is going, there's crisps and there's chocolate. There is wine, but I've never gone there yet. And there are moments, after about 4.5 weeks into the 6-week holidays, I promise you this is true, I go and I stand in a cupboard in my house in the dark, and my friend, because she knows this is where I get to, had pre-bought me pick and mix. It's my favorite. And so I hide my pick and mix, that no one else is having, behind the wine. And so I move the wine out the way, I get my tub of pick and mix, and I just have a few minutes stood in a cupboard in the dark, eating pick and mix on my own. It honestly happens. And some of you guys know, you have your own versions of this, but this, is the cheap trade-off of peace that we kind of accept in our world now. Jesus has, and if you look at the rest of the Bible, God talks about Sabbath, this idea that one day a week we take a whole day to rest and to be, to reconnect with ourselves, with God, with each other. And yet, the version of peace that I kind of claw into my life is being stood in the dark in a cupboard eating sweets, just to kind of get me through the next 2.5 weeks. But unless we're establishing these rhythms of peace in our life, then actually we aren't going to have good soil for deep, spiritual, world-changing peace to take root in our lives. And so the first thing I think Jesus says is missing from our world, the missing piece is this genuine pursuit of peace, not the manufacturing of it. Let's crack on with the story of Jesus, because I don't believe that on its own is the only missing piece. In Matthew 8:23-25, Jesus has had this very busy day. Then he got into the boat and his disciples followed him. Suddenly, a furious storm came upon the lake so that the waves swept over the boat. But Jesus was sleeping. This is the rest. The disciples went and woke him, saying, "Lord, save us, we're going to drown." You see, I don't believe we're just called to pursue peace. Peace is more than just a rhythm. Peace is something, the kind of peace that our world needs and Jesus offers is the kind of peace that can be in a boat in the middle of the storm and remain peaceful despite the chaos that's going on around it. We're not just called to pursue peace, but actually we're called to cultivate peace as well. And I don't say those words lightly. At the ending of that verse, the disciples are saying to Jesus, "Lord, save us, we're going to drown." Like, some of the sizes of the situations that we face, some of the difficulties are so big, they genuinely feel like our whole lives are consumed by them. We are so filled with fear that it feels that actually this is something that could take us down. This is something that could be the end of us. And so I don't say any of what I'm about to say lightly. But I think what we do instead of cultivating peace is that we inwardly, inside of who we are in our spirits, I think that what we do is we try to control our environments so that our own inner peace isn't disturbed. And we work really hard at that. We work really hard at kind of trying to change things, not intentionally manipulate, but kind of work around situations, try and affect things, influence things, so that our own peace isn't disturbed. Because once that's disturbed, it brings up this whole thing inside of us that we're not sure we can cope with. I have some experience in this area, and I know that it's a really difficult thing. A number of years ago, I, for whatever reason, just found peace a really hard thing. I felt anxious a lot of the time. I kind of got chest pains. I had panic attacks in the most ridiculous situations. I wasn't sleeping well. And I generally had like a feeling, an underlying feeling and sense of frustration about pretty much everything. And I thought, oh, this isn't how I was meant to be. This isn't good. And so I went and spent some time with a wonderful lady who did some counselling with me. And the first week, I remember, she sat me down and she said, "Laura, you're like a swan." Oh, I thought, this counselling's brilliant. This is excellent. Graceful, beautiful. She said, "Laura, it's like you're gliding along the top and have this absolutely excellent projection of peace to the rest of the world. But under the water, your feet are going like this. You're working really, really hard to preserve that manufactured, honestly, peace that everybody else sees. Why is it that you feel so committed to, and it's so important for you, to maintain your environment around you, to feel and work hard for this sense of internal peace to not get disturbed?" And I think really, with my time with her, about a year in, I sat down with her and said, we were talking about this the whole time, like this isn't an easy thing. For ages we were talking about it. And she said, I said to her, "We just seem to be talking about the same thing. I guess we're nearly done." And she just looked up at me and went, "Laura, we will both know when you are done." And so this is a thing that's like ongoing and you're working through all of the time. But the real thing I had to get down to was, what is it within me that had to control all of those things? What was the fear inside of me that I was trying not to disturb because I wanted it protected by peace and was trying to change that and make that work and do that thing and be in control of that? And instead I would adjust my world rather than standing in my world, being filled with this peace that Jesus promises us. A few weeks ago, we had the Dream Team party here at church. Make a little bit of noise if you were at the Dream Team party. Yeah, maybe indicate online. Excellent. Well, it's a party that we have once a year to celebrate volunteers. So those of us who give our time to volunteer at the church, we get together once a year and have a little party. And there's often a fancy dress kind of theme to the evening. And this year, it was, "What do you want to be when you grow up?" Now, myself and 4 other wonderful ladies, we decided we would go as the Spice Girls. And it was great. And my day, as our lives was really busy that day of the Dream Team party. And I'd done a whole load of things during the day. We picked up the kids from school. We made them tea. My daughter had a party at Boing Zone around the time that the Dream Team party was due to be on. So I didn't want to go to Boing Zone dressed as a Mel C. So I decided that I would take her to Boing Zone and then come home. But by the time I got home, things had already started here. So I was like, quickly rushed the kids to bed, got home, whacked on my Mel C gear. Now, I don't really read instructions at the best of times. I just think, hey, do you know what? If it doesn't work out, then I'll read it and I'll check where I've gone wrong. So I whacked on all my stuff, went to the bathroom, and I had bought, this is Mel C, but I had bought online some tattoos to make me look like Mel C. And so I thought they're quite expensive, but I was like, fine, whatever, I need what I need. And I bought this, and I went into the bathroom, and I do my kids' tattoos, like fake tattoos all the time, so I was like, right, whack it on, ripped it off, and it didn't show up. I was like, oh. Maybe I've bought UV ones or something. I don't know. So I just was like, oh, well, that's disappointing. I didn't bother with the other one. I was like, I'm late. I've got to go. I got here. Had a wonderful time. A few days later, this tattoo wasn't showing up. And then Andy just said to me, that tattoo's still on your arm. I said, oh, no, you can't see. And this massive tattoo had appeared on my arm. And I thought, well, that's strange. I said, it didn't look like it showed up at the time. And Andy said to me, have you read the instructions for that? Like, did you check what that was? I went, no. He said, well, that's not a surprise. and then, so I went back and I read the instructions. And the instructions said, it may not show up straight away, but the tattoo will fade with the regeneration of your skin. I thought, oh, so how long does that take then? And I looked it up, and it can be up to 3 months. And I realized in the next weeks, I had a golden wedding anniversary that I was hosting in central London, a research launch, I was speaking at conferences, I had all these things that I was supposed to be dressed really nicely for. And all of a sudden in my head, I'm having to rearrange my wardrobe so that I don't turn up to these things with a massive Mel C tattoo on my arm. And so I'm like literally having I just wore jumpers and things for weeks, long sleeves. And I didn't want to scrub it off. I didn't want to try and get it off because I wasn't sure of the mess that would happen if I tried to remove this thing, and it could just get worse. And I joke and I jest with that story. It's completely true. But it also reflected what I had done for so long in my life. I had adjusted things, adjusted situations, tried to justify things or change behavior or do different things outside of myself so to essentially cover up whatever it was that was in me that wasn't comfortable. And I didn't want to deal with that mess because what if I started to unpack that fear in me, that reason that I needed all that control, and things just got worse? You know, I don't believe that God wants us to be people who are having to adjust and tweak and cover ourselves and cover who we are out of fear of dealing with our mess. In fact, controlling the external is never what we were supposed to do. Here, Jesus said this in a different part of the Bible. I have told you these things so that in me you may have peace. Jesus wants us to have this peace. In this world, you will have trouble. It's the next line. Within the same breath, I have come that you might have peace. In this world, you will have trouble. But take heart. I have overcome the world. Jesus hasn't asked me to overcome my world and the stuff that's going on and the things that I can't control. But he's asked me to trust him with those things. And I realize that that is no small thing to say. But what often happens in these situations is that we feel out of control, and then we get this anxious feeling. We lose peace, like this kind of alarm that goes off in us that we can't control that relationship, that health issue, the resolution to that situation. And Jesus said, you were never meant to. You were meant to trust and have peace in who I am and that I am in control. You don't need to play God in this situation. I've already done that. That is what I'm here for. But equally on its own, these two things, pursuing peace and cultivating peace, cannot be the only things that our world needs, that is missing. Because this is a lovely internal narrative that we would feel nice and peaceful and rested. But that's not what our world needs. Our world needs so much more. You see, I believe that pursuing peace is wisdom. Cultivating inner peace inside ourselves is spiritual. But what does maturity look like in this? What does more than spirituality look like? Let's have a look at the final. It looks like establishing peace. Thank you. It looks like this idea of establishing peace. And we see that Jesus does this in this story. In Matthew 8:25-27, it says, the disciples went and woke him, saying, Lord, save us, we're going to drown. He replied, you of little faith, why are you so afraid? Then he got up and rebuked the wind and the waves, and it was completely calm. The men were amazed and asked, what kind of man is this? Even the wind and the waves obey him. We are called to be people that establish peace in our world, that look at our world around us, the situations, the conflicts that we have, the difficult situations, the difficult relationships, the tensions. And we are called to be people that walk into those situations and we establish peace in them. One of the things that we often do to find peace is we sit on social media, but one of the great things that we've actually touched on already a little this morning that happens in our world is this polarization. This sense that we sit at opposite ends of the spectrum to people, and once someone is at the opposite end of the spectrum to you, that's it. They're done. They're written off. There can no longer be peace with that person. If they think this, then I'm over here. And social media will just feed you more of what you believe, what you agree with, what you think is right, that you are right and they are wrong. I have the privilege of being a part of Limitless Festival in the summer. And I began to talk a little about polarization in that setting. And I thought I'd do a bit of an experiment. Well, there were 4,000 people in the room. And I thought, let's have some fun. And so I got all of the young people to stand up. And I said, hey, can you move towards anybody that is in your youth group? Move away from anybody who is not in your youth group, because other church youth groups cannot be trusted. We don't know who they are. Stick with the people that you know. And so everybody moved. I said, okay, staying away still from those other people within your group, can you step away from anybody who is a different gender to you? Because we all know that girls are better than boys. And they did that. And then once I did that, I said, okay, can you step away from anybody who's a different generation to you? Still staying away from those other people. And slowly, you begin to see the room break down. And partway through the illustration, I just said, can you put your hands in the air if you're now stood in complete isolation? Huge amounts of people stood with their hands in the air. But this is how it happens. In our world, whether it be nations, whether it be political viewpoints, whether it be somebody that hurt us, whether it be somebody that we accidentally hurt, these divides and divisions go up, cutting us off from each other. And Jesus calls us to be people of peace in that situation. How do we be people that not only walk between the gaps that form, but draw those gaps together? How are we people, and how do we become people that someone's principle doesn't stop us loving and valuing and having peace with the person? How do we see that because this person has this viewpoint, did this one thing, made that mistake, said that thing, that doesn't mean that I'm not at peace with who you are, because I see Jesus in you, and I see who you are above the principle that I'm really struggling with that's in you at the moment. How do we do that on large scales? How do we do that globally? You know, this is such a need in our world at the moment that there have been world leaders claiming to have made peace between nations that they had nothing to do with. And they're doing that because they recognize the need for peacemakers in our nation and in our world at the present time. A few weeks ago, I was in work. And I was having a conversation with somebody, and we were in a meeting, and it was quite clear that me and this other person, who is wonderful, both saw a situation very differently, and neither of us were moving. And we finished the meeting, and someone came up to me at the end of the meeting and just said, so how are you guys going to resolve that then? And I just sort of looked at them blankly. And they were very kind and reflected back to me and said, you know, in that moment, it would have been really good for you to have shown that you had heard what they'd said, and reflected back that you'd listened. And you know, all of a sudden, you realize you thought you were good at communicating, but I hadn't done that at all. And what I said to this person was, no, I know I didn't do that, but I'd thought about what they'd said, and I just knew they were wrong. And you hear it coming out of your mouth, and you go, oh, that's not okay, is it? And so all of us, like, this person was really kind, and went, the challenge is, there is truth in both sides. You're both right. And we are so quick to write off right and wrong, black and white, yes and no, in and out. It's not that simple. If we're called to be peacemakers in our world, then people have to be valued above our principles, even though we don't agree with them, even though they are opposed. It doesn't negate those things. But maturity has the strength to say, even though I still see Jesus in you, I still see who you are, and I am committed to peace in this situation. And so I think we're called to pursue peace. I think we're called to cultivate peace. I think we're called to establish peace. But the way in which we view peace is so individualistic in our lives. We're in a culture where it's all about us. It's about our personal peace, us feeling okay. And even if a situation has nothing to do, like, I'm not so bothered about a war happening over there because it's not about me. And yet when Jesus spoke into this, his worldview was so different. I mentioned at the start of our time together that Jesus had done some teaching at the start of this day. And it was quite a long talk. And as a part of this talk, he said this, in Matthew 5:9. Blessed are the peacemakers, for they will be called children of God. And this word peacemakers, the word peace there is one, if you've been around church a little while, you may have heard of, is shalom. And this Jewish principle of shalom, it's completeness, it's wholeness, it's soundness, to make whole and to restore. That's what a peacemaker looks like. A peacemaker in Jesus' world is about reconciliation. Reconciliation with ourselves and our own rhythms and our own peace, I'm sure, but with ourselves, with each other, but primarily also with God. For a peacemaker, peace isn't actually about an outcome. Peace is a principle that is woven throughout the world and throughout our lives and can only be fully found in connection with the Creator. At the start of our time together, a few moments ago, we took communion. And the act of communion is about restoring our place with God, about remembering what Jesus did for us and that we are inherently right with God when we are in relationship, active relationship with Jesus. But I wonder what it looks like for us to be fully restored, have peace, not only with ourselves, our need for control, that fear, that brokenness within us, that controlling things makes feel safe inside us. But also, what does it look like to be at peace with each other? In a relationship, in a difficult situation, in your workplace, in your family, in your friendship space, to really be at peace and bring peace and restoration in that. What does it look like for you to be somebody who closes the gap? Now, I have to be honest, you will find me next summer hidden in a cupboard in the dark eating pick and mix. It's a guarantee. However, I also recognize that when I look at what the world needs now, it is not someone hidden in the dark, in a cupboard, shut away, eating comfort food. What it needs is people who are gentle and kind and brave and strong and have integrity and will step into these places of brokenness and bring that peace and kindness and gentleness and strength and truth with them. And in a moment, in Hagley as well, we're gonna have a song sung over us that many of you will know. And in that moment, I wonder wherever you're at with God, whether you will be brave enough to ask God the question, is there anywhere where I either need to cultivate peace, deal with some stuff in me, or maybe establish peace and make a very small step at bringing peace into a situation? And as we go through, I'd encourage you that if you feel like, when you feel like you're done, when you feel like you've spoken to God and he's maybe said something back or you're done, please feel free, if you're able, either here or in Hagley, to stand and to join in with sung worship. But I'm going to pray. And then I'm going to leave it for God to do what he does best. Jesus, you see the storms in our lives, in our world, the storms that feel like are inside of ourselves. And God, I thank you so much that you are a Prince of Peace. God, that you have authority over those storms. And God, we want to be people that don't just keep that peace to ourselves and inhabit it in us in a really nice way, God, but we want to be people who carry that peace into a broken and hurting world. God, where we need better rhythms of peace, where we need the courage to address our mess and let go of control and say, Jesus, you have overcome the world. Jesus, where you are calling us to begin to step into the gap and establish peace. God, would you prompt us with one thing that we can do, one thing that we can be with your strength, with you living in us, that answers what this world needs right now. Amen.